For those who don't know me, I'm Mark Masulo. I'm a board member and I'm the secretary of Cluster Busters. And this morning we're going to be having an oxygen demonstration with Bill Mingus, and Bob Wold is doing a growing demonstration in the other room. And then at around 11 o'clock, Ainsley and her husband Pete are going to be speaking, and then we will be concluding the conference. For those of you who don't know Bill Mingus has had cluster headaches for decades, and he's been an advocate for about as many years as he's had cluster. He is our oxygen expert. If you want to know about oxygen use, check with Bill. So we are really fortunate to have him with us today. He did an oxygen demonstration on Friday. It was really well attended and people were very grateful for what you had to offer, Bill. So thanks so much for being here today.
Well, I appreciate that, Mark. I always think I could have done a better job whenever I do a presentation, and I turn around and think, well, you know, maybe I didn't do too bad a job. I will say this, they were scheduled to replay Friday's demonstration, and the technical difficulties kind of didn't work out because I didn't think I could do a better job than I did on Friday, but we'll see if we can't beat that. A little background on me. I've had cluster headaches since the late 90s. Took me a couple of years to get diagnosed. I was lucky. I found a good headache neurologist, but I wasn't really an advocate of oxygen at first, because I figured, just like a lot of people, I don't want to drag a tank around. It's just for old people that can't breathe, and so on and so forth. But I was at a meet and greet in Davenport, Iowa, that we used to have every January. That shows you how smart cluster heads can be, going to Davenport, Iowa in January. I had a rogue hit. I wasn't in cycle, but I had one pop up for whatever reason, and somebody shoved an oxygen mask in my face and said, here, try this. And it was a 15 liter a minute mask, but I mean, regulator and a cheap non-rebreather, but my gosh, it helped. So that was like a mule kick to the head. I said, well, you know, I need to check this stuff out. So I started asking around, trying to assemble what I needed and get a prescription, so on and so forth. And a member on clusterheadaches.com, the old message board over there, went by the name of Mr. Happy, of all people. I asked him, what kind of regulator should I get? He said, well, get the one that has the highest flow rates you can find. It's just like a car. You can never have too much horsepower. So I got a 15. That's all I could find at the time. And cluster heads put together a different mask other than the cheap non-rebreather, and I'll hold one of these up. This is what you get if you rely on your oxygen supplier to give you a mask. Well, it's better than nothing, but it's not what we as cluster heads need. It has holes here front. You have to tape them out. The mask does not fit tight against your face. And the bag is less than great. This is for use in an ambulance, basically, getting somebody to the hospital, that kind of thing. I digress. As time went by, I ordered 25 liter a minute regulator, and with cluster heads put together a good mask from parts and pieces. This made all the difference in the world for my abort times at 25 liters a minute. There was as much difference between 15 and 25 as there was from 15 and nothing. It was a snap of the fingers compared to 15 liters a minute. So I said, well, you know, maybe everybody needs to know this. So I started telling people, and some people didn't think it was all that important. And some people tried it, and I'd shove a high flow mask connected to a high flow regulator at a conference in somebody's face, and their eyes would get real big. Said, wow. So people started to accept that, and I was by no means the first one to come up with it. I just happened to be the one that slapped people around a little harder than others and said, hey, try this. So I've kind of tried to be the go-to guy because there wasn't anybody like that in totality when I started out. And I wanted people to be able to, if I ask somebody, say, hey, will this work? Will this not work? But I, by all means, do not know everything. I'm not a medical professional. I'm just a guy in North Carolina that has cluster headaches that has tried to learn as much as he can about aborting with oxygen. So we're going to go on. We'll talk a little bit about equipment, and then I'm going to give a demonstration on how I personally abort. There's as many methods to breathe as there are people. I try to give people a good starting point. So this is what works for me, but that doesn't mean it's going to work as well for you. You have to talk to other people, see what works, but try methods I give you. They may be all you need. Some people hyperventilate with room air and then take a gulp of oxygen, hold it for 30 seconds. They say that aborts real well. I have not been able to get that to work for me. That doesn't mean it doesn't work for them, and it's not something they should try and do. But personally, I don't have the presence of mind to do that if I'm really getting hit. Mark, somebody's asked, can we see Bill full screen? And I was going to ignore that, but I don't know how to do that myself. So
right now.
Andrew, can you take care of that? Okay.
Oh goodness.
Thank you.
I am. Okay, yeah, spotlighted my video. Okay, I'll hold the mask up again since it was small. This is what you get if you go to clusterheadaches.com store and order an O2 cluster kit. It comes with all you see here and a face mask as well. I don't use these. A lot of people do. I'll explain why in just a minute. And I would like to preface everything I show you today, I get no financial compensation for. This is just stuff that I found that's good to use. I don't care where you buy stuff. I'm not selling anything. In fact, I've given away more stuff than I can ever count. I don't earn a dime. So anyway, we'll talk a little bit about equipment now. For people that say, oh, I can't be lugging a tank around, a D tank with a 25 liter a minute regulator hooked to a cluster mask. This is what I use in my vehicle. They make carrying cases for these things. Right here they are. I have carried this into numerous sporting venues, school meetings. I used to carry it into work. It's particularly if you black this out, nobody knows this isn't a cooler when you're walking into a football game. Go through security, tell them it's medical O2, they don't care. And you can always sneak out behind the bathroom for the few minutes it takes you to abort. You go right back and enjoy what you came to see. I was a firm believer in not letting cluster headaches beat me or keep me from doing what I wanted to do. And this was the thing that I came up with to do that. You don't get as many aborts out of one of these small tanks, but it'll get you back to the truck or your car where you got a bigger tank if you absolutely have to. Attached to this, it's really nondescript. It's something that a lot of places, a lot of medical supply houses will tell you doesn't exist. This is a 40 liter a minute regulator. Doesn't look any different than the 25, but if you outrun a 25, this might be your answer. And I'm going to demonstrate what I mean by outrun something. You outrun your regulator. For those that don't know me or can't tell over the screen, I'm a pretty big guy. I'm about 6'3", so I've got pretty big lungs. You can, for me, it was easy to outrun the mask, and I'll demonstrate that in just a second. By the way, I've neglected to mention this. Keys for the oxygen tank to turn them on and off. I don't care how good you are. When you're in cycle, keep one or two of these in your pocket because you will forever be looking for one. And I swear you don't want to be sitting at your oxygen tank unable to turn it on and be getting hit because you can't find a key. So I try to keep one, if I'm in cycle, in my pocket at all times. The tanks that I use, I have keys attached to them by lanyards. I don't know, many of you might have heard Ruthie in the chat room talk about, she was in her room, had oxygen tanks at a conference and could not turn them on because she didn't have a key. We ended up having to demand that the management let us in the room to turn her oxygen tank on for her. She was sitting there getting hit, one of those hour hits, and she couldn't do a thing. So keys, get extras, keep them with you. All right, I've turned this on, and I'm going to give a demonstration of my breathing, just normal breathing, not an abort breathing, just normal breathing at 15 liters a minute with a cluster mask. This is 15 liters a minute. Notice I'm sucking the bag flat. If you're getting hit, this is not going to abort you very well. It will help, but it will not be in a great abort time. Now at 25, that bag's going to fill up faster. I can still outrun that, but I'm getting a whole lot more oxygen in my lungs. All right. This is a problem that I ran up on when I was really getting whacked. And I said, well, there's got to be a better way. And yes, there is. That 40 liter a minute regulator that I show you is one answer. Another answer is demand valve. Now, a lot of people hear demand valve and they think, oh, it is something that is going to abort my headaches magically. No, it's not. A demand valve shines and it gives you all you can take. And it doesn't matter whether you get it from a demand valve or a real high flow regulator, as long as the bag's not going flat and you're breathing, doing your breathing technique, you don't need anything else. You don't need a higher flow than that. If you can do it at 15 liters a minute, you don't need a 25. If you can do it at 25, you don't need a demand valve. But if you're constantly sitting there waiting for oxygen, waiting for the bag to fill, a demand valve can do it, or that 40 liter a minute regulator that I showed you, it can do it too. I'll touch on using a Welding tank because a lot of people do that. There are many ways to use welding oxygen, and most of them are just like what we do here with a medical tank. Medical oxygen is the same as the welding oxygen. Welders can't weld good welds with impure oxygen or additives in it. So it's the same stuff. The tanks are different. I've watched them fill both from the same tank. They probably don't like knowing that, but if you get your own welding tank, you buy it, you know where it's been, you know that it has not been subjected to any mixing of the gas or anything, it's safe as far as I'm concerned. You have to make that determination for yourself. And I'm not going to tell you to do it, but I know people that do it all the time with no adverse effect. And I have used it myself with no adverse effect.
Bill,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt you. Bill, I'm sorry to interrupt you. There are two questions. Do you want to answer them now, or do you want to hold off?
I will try to I'll come back and get them.
Okay, but
that's okay.
So one of them is, can you show the demand valve?
That's coming. That's coming.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
That's all. I'll use the demand valve to demonstrate the breathing technique. All right. This is a welding regulator that I got from Harbor Freight. I got about 3 of them in a tub down here. I bought every one they had. And you notice it's got the barb fitting here for your mask plug-in for the cluster mask. Now this will give you a flow that no human being on earth could keep up with. So you have to be careful when you turn it on, you just crack it a little bit and come up. You cannot just twist it. It'll blow the bag off the mask. But this is one cheap way of high flow, no expensive demand valve. That's it. You just have to learn to finesse this thing and turn the valve to open it up. I've actually had these at the conferences, took the tanks to demonstrate to people. I wish I had Welding tank here right now, or this will also fit a medical M tank too. So it's a cheap alternative. I know people are tight for money right now. You can buy these on Amazon for, I think it was $30. I can't remember. I have a link in a PDF file that I will forward to you. If you send me an email, everything I talk about today, I have on a PDF file, links to buy them. By no means is that the only place to get the stuff. It's just a start for you. And there's other informative links on there as well. And I'll give my email here in a little bit, and hopefully you might be able to send me an email if you want it, and I'll forward you the PDF file. Now I'm going to do a little breathing demonstration. Before I do, I'm going to explain just a little bit about demand valves. A demand valve hooks to a regulator that looks like this. Has what they call disc fittings or power takeoffs, because they don't use the clear plastic tubing. They use a pressure hose. And I'll drag the big tank over here and I'll demonstrate that. All right, I'm not going to hook this up. It's already hooked up. This is a high pressure hose. You'll notice it's thicker. It's less pliable than just a cluster mask clear medical tubing. This is because it's always under pressure. You'll understand that here in a minute. This is a demand valve that I use. It was basically sourced in Europe by Lindy several years ago when they tried to service the cluster headache community. Unfortunately, it was too expensive for the average person to buy. I got a discount on it and I bought one, and I love it, but it's also very hard to source parts for these things too, because they're just not available here in the United States. If they are, I haven't found one. So don't go looking for this one in particular. This is one, it's made by, well, Allied Healthcare Products. Couldn't remember the name. And all this is the valve itself. It doesn't have the tubing for the mask or the mouthpiece. It doesn't have the hose. You'd have to figure that out. But this is more likely a representative of what you would find if you won't go out and buy one off the internet today. It almost looks like a scuba regulator. It's very simple, very small. In fact, I actually prefer some of the features of this better, because if the hose on this one ever deteriorates, it's worthless because it's permanently made into the demand valve. All right, I'm going to demonstrate my two go-to breathing techniques. Like I said before, this is not the only way to do it, but it's the two ways that I find most effective for me. That doesn't mean it's going to be effective for you, but I want to give you a baseline to at least start trying. And you'll notice when I gave a little bag demonstration earlier, I don't use a face mask. You of course can. You just attach it on there and use it. I don't like the things. I do not like that on my face, particularly when I'm getting hit very hard. My face gets sore. I'm also claustrophobic. I don't like that on my face. It tends to freak me out after a while. So I use a tube. There's nothing wrong with that. It works just as well as the mask, because if the mask worked better than this, I'd be using the mask freaked out or not. So that's one way I can put it. Now, two breathing techniques. The first one, I just inhale as much as I can and exhale as much as I can, and do an abdominal crunch, try to get all the air out of my lungs before I take the next breath. I'll demonstrate that now. This is also a good demonstration of the demand valve. I take a puff, it stops, no waste. That's not really a concern for most people, but it stops when you stop, it starts when you start. Now, I'm going to demonstrate the first technique. Just that simple. Try to get all the air out of your lungs. Some people say you stand up, it works better. I sit down, it works better. Now the second one is, the second technique is a little bit more work, for lack of a better term. What you're going to do is try to hyperventilate on pure oxygen. And if you try this, you'll find that it's not easy. It takes work and it'll wear you out, but sometimes it will abort faster. I vary the technique to whichever one the beast seems to hate the most that day. I don't really have a preference. Sometimes I'll switch it up during both of them. All right, they're asking, am I full screen to everybody now? I hope I am. I am to me anyway. All right, I'm going to demonstrate the hyperventilation technique, and obviously I'm not going to hyperventilate sitting here without a headache, but you won't get much out of that, but I'll demonstrate a few puffs with it. That's what I'm trying to do. In as fast as I can, out as fast as I can with an abdominal crunch. If you start feeling lightheaded, you're doing it right. Somehow, the mechanism that whatever it does to your body seems to abort faster sometimes. Now, a lot of people ask, should you stay on the oxygen after you abort your headache? Sometimes I do, most times I don't. I can tell when the pain starts melting back into the ether, for lack of a better term. A lot of times I'll just stop and it just keeps on going down. I don't get it coming back instantly. A lot of people are proponents of staying on it for a few minutes afterwards. That's something you have to decide for yourself. I don't think there's a blanket statement that covers that, just like anything else concerning oxygen. You got to find out what fits you. Personally, I don't stay on it maybe once out of 10 or 15 aborts. Some people stay on it 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes after they abort. Whatever works for you. So I'm not going to tell you, no, it doesn't do anything, but I know people that it works for. But myself, most of the time, I don't do it. Every once in a while, if I get a stubborn one, I will. And I'll add that oxygen has worked every single time that I have used it, save for 2 times. And those 2 times are scary. If you want to scare me to death, tell me oxygen is not going to work my next cycle. That's frightening. But it was only 2 times out of all these years. I can't argue with that. Some aborts have taken longer, some not been taken very long at all. One good thing about having a demand valve beside your bed is you can just reach up, turn the tank on, and grab it. You don't have to worry about what flow rate you're on. I can abort generally in about 5 minutes, 7 minutes. I will turn it off and go back to bed, go to sleep, and hopefully not get hit again. That's where a demand valve shines the best to me. Or in a car, you reach back, turn the thing on, and start huffing at the first sign of the headache. You don't have to worry about anything else. Okay, I'm going to touch on safety a little bit, and then we're going to I'm going to answer every question that you throw at me. Please don't smoke around this stuff. I know people that do. I keep waiting for them to die. It's not a good thing. Oxygen doesn't explode, but it's an accelerant. and it can get in your clothes for a little bit. It can stay, the oxygen concentration be a little bit higher around you. Don't light up a cigarette sitting next to a tank. When I was a smoker, I had the tank in one room. That's where I went to a board. I smoked in other areas of the house. I never smoked in that room, which was my bedroom. That's not to say you should be scared of the tank. As long as you take reasonable safety precautions, it's not going to explode on you. Somebody gave a good thing yesterday, Friday, in the demonstration I did. They had a sign on the exterior of their house as oxygen tanks present in this house. In case of a fire, the first responders know their tanks in there, because if these things do get too hot, they will explode. And a house fire would probably cause that. If you ever want to see what a tank can do when it explodes, there's a couple of videos on YouTube, which I don't have links to, where some yahoo shoots one with a 30-06 and it explodes with pretty good force, and then another one in a fire. Not fun. So be careful, take precautions. They do make, for lack of a better term, fire break valves for these, for the tubing. I don't use them because the daggone things will restrict the flow too bad, anything above 15 liters a minute. All right, I think I have pretty much well covered everything that I wanted to cover. Oh, a little bit of maintenance. These are extra washers. Go right here on a post type valve. Keep a couple of these around, because if you ever swap the valve to a new tank and it starts leaking bad, and you're not going to get an abort, you're going to waste oxygen. Your O2 supplier will probably give you a few of these things free, or you can buy them off the internet for 50 of them for $10 or something. I keep them around all the time. I carry them with me to conferences, because the leaky valve's not going to do you any good. All right, the question at the bottom, how does the demand valve connect to the tank? It connects to a regulator like this. It takes the power takeoff, and I'll try to drag this thing over here again. I didn't see it. It actually bolts onto that power takeoff right here. You have to tighten it up with a wrench, just a tick. You don't really tighten it up like the lug nuts on your car. But it's just as simple as that. Screws on, snug it up, you're done. The demand valve never comes off this regulator that I have mine on. That's just my demand valve regulator. Whatever tank it goes on, I just keep the demand valve to it. Hold on just a moment. Ow.
Hey, Lisa.
Got visitors. Sweetie, whatever. Train of thought blown. It connects right there. Snug it up, as I said. Now, I think I've got all things now. Let's see. Demand valve. Can a scuba regulator be used instead of a demand valve? Yes and no. Some of the materials in a scuba rig, I've been told, will break down under pure oxygen. I don't know that to be a fact. I know people that use converted scuba regulators with new reeds and everything. That's up to you. I've got one. I don't use it that much. I know people that use them. They've never had a problem, but I'm not going to recommend them because I've heard that. I'd make sure everything inside was fresh. But yes, they will work if you adapt them. Does oxygen work for high level constant pain? It's not specifically a 10 plus cluster event. Should it be used in the same manner? If it's a different type of headache, I don't know that it will. Some migrainers say it helps with their migraines. Most don't. I don't know. If you were around for Wes's presentation yesterday, he had much the same problem. He ended up getting a stimulator put in and it massages at the point of his pain. That did away with the constant pain. But he still has to abort clusters with oxygen. So he was dealing with a couple of different type of headaches. So the only thing I know to tell you is to try it and see. What is the typical amount of time it takes you to abort your headache using either of these techniques? Well, it depends on the hit, how early I get it. I mentioned sometimes if I get it quick, it's like 5 minutes or under. I have had them take 20 minutes. And like I said, I've had 2 that I couldn't abort. So average, I'd say 10 minutes, maybe a little less.
Bill,
Yes.
there's some thinking that it's important to try to get use an abortive, oxygen specifically, as we're talking about it now. The moment you notice, hi Lisa, the moment you notice a little tingle or whatever, the prodromal effect, to shut down that pain neuropathway. Because the longer we let the pain manifest, the harder it is to get rid of it. And
Absolutely.
it forms it forms a rigid sort of pathway that's really hard to shut down. So do you want to talk about that at all?
Absolutely. I know people that will sit and just wait. You know, I'll see if it gets bad before I get on the oxygen, or I'll sit here and wait before I use my triptan or whatever. Don't wait. Grab the oxygen, go to it, and keep on going. Don't wait till it gets to a 10 before, oh, I guess I'm going to have to take the oxygen. You know, no, you're not sorry. Keep going. All right, let's go. Now that my concentration has been fully broken, I have a family member who is on constant O2 for COPD. She's been told not to stay on O2 for over 2 liters for longer than she absolutely needs to because it can be damaging. 25 or 40 liters a minute is way higher. Obviously, constant O2 is not what we're talking about for the cluster headache, but I'm curious, have you heard or experienced this? Yes, most doctors will say it takes about 4 hours to do oxygen toxicity on somebody that is not affected by COPD or any other underlying conditions. A COPD patient probably doesn't need to stay on it for very long. That's true. A normal, healthy human being, I wouldn't have any qualms about doing it. Batch, if many of you have seen some of his posts, he likes to talk about his fighter pilot experience when they were on pure oxygen for 3 or 4 hours during a mission. I figure if the U.S. Air Force trains a fighter pilot and lets them do it, then it can't be unsafe for us either. All right, let's see. Took my time to... I use the full mask on my face. I breathe through my nose instead of my mouth. Does that make a difference not using my mouth? Well, your mouth can take in more oxygen than your nose can. At least that's my opinion. I would breathe. I use my mouth. I don't really use my nose at all. I couldn't get the flow through my nose, particularly with one side stopped up during a cluster attack to get anything. I feel blessed right now in the UK. Everything comes in one complete unit, so none of this applies. It's also free, and I get as much as I need. For those of you who never used O2, it's a lifesaver. Chug a Red Bull before and staying on it a bit longer helps. If not, come back. First twinge, get on it. Yeah, I agree. The only thing that I have a question for the UK person, AMM. I know the regulators are permanently mounted to the tanks. What's the flow rate on those tanks? And you can just type your response in and I'll see it. It's 15 liters a minute. So if you needed more than 15 liters a minute, you'd have to daisy chain them together to get a higher flow than 15. That would be a problem for me because a 15 is not for me. Would you know of a good mask technique to breathe through the nose? No, I'm sorry, I don't. I've never tried it to breathe through my nose solely. I always breathe through my mouth. It will dry my mouth out, but I always keep it wet. I don't know why. Is there a reason why you would breathe through your nose and not your mouth? All right, is there concern with oxygen nearby electrical devices such as heating pads being used? Only if they're shorting out. If you had something that had a open spark, yes, that would be a problem. But, I mean, there's a lamp right here. I guess conceivably it could be a problem, but I've never heard of it.
Bill, I wanted to say something.
Sure.
So I've used oxygen for 35, 36 years now for pain and cluster pain. And I did not know about breathing through the mouth until I saw your demonstration a couple years ago. And that changed my life. That changed my experience with the use of oxygen. It made it much more effective for me, breathing through the mouth. And getting the mask that you held up that is designed for cluster use. The other mask was not as effective as the one that we use for cluster headaches. So thank you for that. That was remarkable for me. The other thing I wanted to mention for folks is that if you're considering coming off of your traditionally prescribed medications, you will absolutely need oxygen to help you abort your pain attacks. I call them pain attacks. I don't call them headaches. To help you abort your pain attacks, because you're not going to be using sumatriptan or something else. And you will have attacks, and you'll have it if you're starting alternatives. You'll have attacks as you're addressing your pain. So you'll want to have your oxygen handy.
Absolutely. It does not get, excuse me, detoxing for dosing. Oxygen is absolutely necessary. I couldn't even begin to try and do that back in the day without my oxygen. Could you post links where we can purchase demand valve compatible reg? Yes, I'm going to type in my email address. And if you will, if I get on here we are. If you will send me an email, I have a PDF file that I will gladly forward to each and every one of you if necessary, with links to get you started on your search to buy any of the equipment you've seen me use here. Amazon is a good source for these regulators. They have both the type with the power takeoffs and the ones that are not. If you want a 40 liter a minute regulator, WT Farley sells them. You can customize them to your specifications. I have a link for those as well. I also have a link to both clusterheadaches.com and the Cluster Buster site for oxygen. The instructions there, in case I missed something or you need clarification. I also include a photograph that illustrates the different size tanks. And I hope all that's it will be something you can use. Are the demand valve regulators that are compatible? Is it with the bigger tanks? Okay. There are a couple ways to use a demand valve with a large tank, like an M tank. You can buy adapters to make a medical reg work on a big tank, the M tank, or a welding tank. You can also use the regulators for the welding regulators on a post type tank. with this adapter. I wish I had one of the other adapters to show you that goes the other way. But there's always more than one way to skin a cat, and this is one way. If you've got a welding regulator and you have some medical tanks, just get this, put it on there, you're great. I'm also going to touch on transfilling in just a minute. There's a couple ways that you can kind of circumvent the medical community's supply of oxygen. If you've got a welding tank and a few medical tanks, smaller tanks, you can actually buy what they call transfill adapters and fill your own tanks. I'm not going to go into that here. I was going to try and do a demonstration of that at the conference, but I'll try and do that next year since I don't have a welding tank or a big M tank here to demonstrate it. But and I've got a link to that there. And if you want to know more about that, I'll be glad to tell you in an email, or we can chat in the big chat room later.
Any other questions for Bill? Bill, thanks so much. I think what you have to offer is helpful to everybody who uses oxygen and for folks who are considering using oxygen, which should be every cluster, every person with cluster.
Absolutely. Everybody should try this. There's no way that you let this go without you at least giving it a try. How often do you have to get your tank refilled? It depends on the tank size and how bad I'm getting hit. I mean, I can burn off an E-tank in one day if it's bad enough. I've used 2 a day. And then I've got some tanks out here right now that I haven't touched for 2-3 years. So it just depends. Oh, you can't see it on the chat screen? Let me try it again.
You didn't post it to everybody, Bill.
Oh, well, I said all panelists. Okay, I'm sorry. All panelists and attendees. This is my first weekend with Zoom, so I apologize.
You're doing great.
I'm still a Zoom newbie, so.
Bill, I think there might be some question with regard to how long it takes for the oxygen to, I think that's a lingering question that I'm sensing based on the one related to how often you get your tank refilled. I think folks are curious about how long it takes once you start inhaling the oxygen. And you probably may want to talk about how it really does depend. You may have a tank that lasts 2 months. That same tank might be gone in 2 hours.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I find if I get on high flow with the man valve, waking up from a hit, 5-10 minutes max. Catch it when you first start, maybe 5 minutes. I have, like I said before, I've had it take 20 minutes. To average it out, 10 minutes maybe. That's about all I can offer. It depends. Sometimes my hits just are stubborn and they don't want to go away. Sometimes they respond a little bit better to oxygen. So I hate to say it depends, but it does. It just depends on the individual situation. And I appreciate y'all coming and listening to me ramble here. I hope I've done a little bit of good for you. One thing I didn't touch on that I mentioned on Friday, and I'm very remiss. A lot of people worry about tanks sitting in their basement or their garage or even their living room, where you've got 5 or 6 E-tanks sitting there and somebody bumps them and they all fall over. Well, make friends with your local grocery store clerk or convenience store clerk and get the 2-liter Pepsi or Coke racks that they deliver the 2 liters in. E-tanks and D-tanks fit right in those things, and you can't hardly knock them over when they're full. Just a little crate, stick them in there. It's great.
Bill, I think it's unanimous. Everyone appreciates what you had to offer us today and is grateful for your expertise and your generosity.
I'm glad I can give back to the community that's given so much to me.
So we are going to take a break now. This is the room we'll stay in for the next presentation, which is Ainsley course and her husband Pete course. So we'll be back at around 11. I'm gonna close out my screen now because I have to relocate. So to another part of this facility. Lisa, hi. So we'll see you back in about 12 minutes or so. And again, Bill, thanks so much. And thank you all for attending this part of the conference. Really useful. Really.
Thanks, Bill.
See ya.